They were betrayed with a phone call to the headquarters in Amsterdam of the Sicherheidsdienst. Maybe it was one of the helpers, or did someone in the warehouse hear them? Hi everyone and welcome back to New Mystery Talk. I thought it was time for another true crime video. It's a bit different than the other ones I made. It's about one of the most well-known people who lived during the Second World War and unfortunately also died during the Second World War. She is known for writing a diary while she was hiding from the Nazis during the occupation of the Netherlands. And since I live in the Netherlands, we know the story very well. We also learn about this story while we are taught about the Second World War at school. And the girl I want to talk about is Anne Frank, or maybe in English you know her as Anne Frank. Unfortunately and sadly, Anne and her family were betrayed and they were discovered by the Nazis and they were brought to a concentration camp called Bergen-Belsen. In this video I will tell you all about her life and her legacy, but the main topic of this video is who betrayed Anne Frank and her family. It's something that people have been wondering for over 70 years. And recently, last year, we found out some new information. So I thought it was interesting to compare the information we have now to the information we already had. I'm going to mention the hard conditions in the concentration camps. And of course this is a very sad story. So if you feel like you can't handle that, maybe you should not watch this video. Otherwise we are gonna start with this video right now. Anne might have lived in the Netherlands, but she was actually born in Germany. She was born in the city of Frankfurt am Main on the 12th of June 1929. Her full name was Annelies Marie Frank. Her parents were Otto Heinrich Frank and Edith Frank. Before Anne was born, they already had a daughter and her name was Margot Betty Frank. She was born on the 16th of January 1926, which made her 3 years older than Anne. Their parents were liberal Jews and they were very devoted parents. They encouraged their daughters to read and they were very interested in scholarly pursuits. Their family had a very happy life, but life was going to get harder for the family. After the First World War, Germany was in a very bad condition. Unemployment was very high and poverty was very severe. During this time, Adolf Hitler and his party were gaining more and more supporters because he promised the Germans that he would bring them glory and make everything better again. But he did this by taking advantage of the anti-Semitic sentiments of the German people. He hated the Jews because many Jews were very wealthy and somehow Jews are always blamed throughout history. So he blamed all the Jews for the problems that Germany had to face. In 1933, Adolf Hitler's Nazi party won the federal election and Hitler was appointed Chancellor of the Reich. The Chancellor of the Reich is the head of the federal government of Germany and the commander-in-chief of the German armed forces during wartime. So he finally had the power that he wanted. This was very scary for the German Jews and the hatred towards them grew in Germany. And since the poor economical state of Germany didn't help the matter, Otto and Edith Frank decided to move to Amsterdam. Before they moved to Amsterdam, Otto stayed in Frankfurt, while Edith and the children went to her mother in Aachen. But Otto received an offer to start a business in Amsterdam, so he moved to the Netherlands to find a home and start to organize the business. The company was called Opekta, also known as Gies & Co, and Otto became the managing director of their new Dutch operation. The company sold the fruit extract pectin, which was used to make jelly. During that time, Edith traveled back and forth between Amsterdam and Aachen, and during that time they finally found a place to live. It was an apartment on the Merwedeplein in the Rivierenbuurt neighborhood of Amsterdam. There were many more Jewish, German refugees settled there. In November of 1933, Edith followed her husband to Amsterdam, and a month later Margot also arrived. Anne stayed with her grandmother until February when she joined her parents and her sister in Amsterdam. And Anne and Margot were enrolled in school. Margot went to the public school and Anne went to the 6th of the Montessori school. And Anne loved to go to school and she met many children from her age. At first she had some difficulty with the Dutch language, but it would all turn out just fine. Anne also met Annelie Goslar on her school and she would become one of her best friends. In 1938, Otto decided to start a new company called Pectacon. He would sell herbs, pickling salt and mixed spices that were used in the production of sausages. One of his employees, Herman van Pels, was also Jewish. He was a butcher who also fled from Germany. You will hear more about him later. Starting a second company was a very good idea because things were looking up. It was more profitable than only selling pectin. And Anne and Margot also enjoyed their new lives. They started to speak Dutch very well and they made a lot of new friends. It seemed like a happy life was in front of them. But then on September the 1st, 1939, the Nazis invaded Poland. This would be the start of the Second World War and Anne was only 10 years old. The Netherlands wanted to be neutral, just like they did with the First World War, but the Nazis didn't care about it and they decided to invade the Netherlands as well. They bombed the city of Rotterdam on the morning of the 13th of May in 1940, which was one of the biggest harbors in the world. And actually my grandmother was there when this happened and it was horrible. Luckily my family survived. But this meant that the Netherlands didn't have a choice and they had to surrender to the Nazis. Life for the Jews in the Netherlands would become very complicated and difficult. It started with small things like not being able to visit parks, cinemas or non-Jewish shops. More and more places would become off limits for Anne and her family. And if that wasn't enough, Jews were not allowed to own their own companies and to go to a public school. They had to go to a special Jewish school. Eventually the Jews had to start wearing the Star of David on their clothes to make the separation of the normal people undeniable. Otto tried to arrange for his family to immigrate to America, but his application for a visa was never processed. This was also because there was a lot of paperwork lost while Rotterdam was bombed. It's so sad that a place where they thought they could be safe would also turn in a Jew-hating country. So they stayed in the Netherlands and this went on for 2 years. And it was time for Anne's 13th birthday. And this is where Anne's story really starts. Because on her 13th birthday she received her famous diary. It was actually an autograph book with a lock on the front. She was very happy with it and she decided to give it the name Kitty. 8 days after she received it, she decided to write in it. She listed many of the restrictions and she was talking about everything that was going on in her life. In the summer of 1942, the deportation of Jews in the Netherlands started. Plans were made by the Frank family to go into hiding because Margot received a call up to report for a so-called labor camp in Nazi Germany. Otto and Edith were very suspicious and they did not believe that it was a labor camp. So the next day they decided to go into hiding to escape from prosecution. Anne had to leave her cat Moortje behind and that made her very sad. Which I completely understand because if I would have to leave my dog behind, I would cry a whole river. So Anne didn't really know about this, but Otto had prepared for this for months. In the spring of the same year, he already started to furnish a hiding place in the annex of his business premises. His business was located at Prinsengracht 263, also in Amsterdam. The entrance was hidden behind a bookcase that could be used as a door. Then you had to climb small stairs to reach the second floor. His former colleagues would help him arrange it and they would also help him while they were hiding there. And I've also been to that place and it's very small and it's very impressive. So if you are in Amsterdam one day, you really should visit it. It's it's heartbreaking and interesting at the same time. So they moved to the Achterhuis on July the 6th, 1942. Their apartment was left in a state of disarray to make people believe that they left very sudden. Otto also left a note that said that they were going to Switzerland. This is also what Anne's best friend Hannelie Goslar believed. There were, of course, not many people who knew that they were hiding because that would be very dangerous. The less people know, the better. Only a few people knew they were hiding because they were helping them. Of course, the former employees named Victor Kugler, Johannes Kleiman, Miep Gies and Beb Voskuil knew it. Also, Gies' husband and Voskuil's father knew about it. They were all the helpers for the duration of their confinement. They informed the family of war news and political developments. They ensured their safety and they supplied them with food, and that would become more and more difficult the longer they stayed hidden. It was very courageous for the helpers to aid them, because when people would find out that you were helping Jews, you could be facing a death penalty. The Frank family would not stay alone for long in the Achterhuis. They were joined by the Van Pels family, which included Herman, August, and their son Peter. And Herman was the butcher I mentioned before that worked with Otto. Peter, or maybe I can call him Peter for this video, was 16 years old. A few months later, Fritz Pfeffer, a dentist and family friend, also joined them. And Em would often write about all of them. At first, she was very happy with their company, but soon tension would develop in the group. But you can't really blame them because you are forced to live in such a small space. You can't go anywhere, you have to be quiet, of course tension is gonna come. The guests would also eat a lot of food and Anne was very annoyed by that. Anne had her own room in the Achterhuis and she had a lot of pictures of famous people on the walls. And eventually she had to share her room with Fritz Pfeffer, and he was her father's age, so this also caused a lot of tension. And her room was filled with all these famous people because she also really wanted to become famous. She wanted to be a reporter or a writer. And Peter van Pels, she didn't like him too at first. He was shy and awkward, but eventually she started to see him in a different light. She received her first kiss from him and eventually they started to have a relationship. But she wasn't really sure if she really liked him or if she liked him because he was the only person that she could like because she was not allowed to go anywhere else. And life in the Achterhuis was very dangerous. The warehouse under their hiding place was still operating, and during the week the men in the warehouse would start their working day in the early morning around 8:30 a.m. And the people in the office who were helping them would not start working yet, so any noise that the people in hiding would make would be very dangerous because their helpers couldn't make up a story to explain why there was such a lot of noise. They had to be very quiet and they had to wear socks to avoid risky situations. And when the warehouse workers would go for their lunch, the helpers would come up to the secret annex to have lunch with them. And sometimes Johan Voskuil and Bab's father and Miep Gies' husband would join them as well, although they didn't even work in the warehouse. Around 5:30 p.m. the warehouse workers would go home and Beb Voskuil would go to the secret annex to ask if the people in hiding would need anything. And after she left, the people in hiding could do anything they wanted. Of course, always responsible. Life was very boring and Anne hated the Sundays most of all, because then she would wander around and feel locked up like a songbird that lost his wings in his cage, surrounded by total darkness. They lived in the Achterhuis for over 2 years. But then on the morning of August the 4th, 1944, the Achterhuis was stormed by German uninformed police. The Franks, Van Pelses and Pfeffer were taken to the RSHA headquarters. There they were interrogated and held overnight. They had to stay in an overcrowded prison and 2 days later they were transported to Westerbork transit camp. And since they were hiding, they were considered criminals and they were sent to the punishment barracks for hard labor. In September of the same year, the family was transported from Westerbork to the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. They had to go there by train and the journey took 3 days. Thousands of people were packed closely together in cattle wagons. There was little food and water and only a barrel to use as a toilet. Many people already died on their way to Auschwitz. Upon arrival at Auschwitz, a Nazi doctor would check to see who was able to do heavy labor and who was too weak. Around 350 people who were in the train with Anne and her family were taken to the gas chambers and murdered. Anne, Margot and their parents were deemed healthy enough to work, so they were sent to the labor camp. They would not go to the same camp because men and women were separated. So Otto had to leave his family to go to a camp for men. Anne was soon made aware that most people were guests when they arrived at the concentration camp. So she was convinced that her father had died and also the other people who stayed with them in the Achterhuis. Little did she know that this was not the case. Life was very hard and inhumane at the camps. There were many diseases and people died every single day of exhaustion and of starvation. Anne was 15 years old and one of the youngest people to be spared from her transport. She was forced to get her clothes off to be disinfected. Her head had to be shaved and she also got a tattoo with an identification number on her arm. This also happened to the other people who were sent to work in the camp. During the day they had to carry rocks and dig rolls of sod. It was very exhausting and they couldn't even sleep because sleeping was very uncomfortable. They had to sleep in overcrowded and cramped barracks, so they could not even get energy to work. And this really breaks my heart, but eventually Edith Frank decided to eat less so that she could save up some more food for her daughters. And this made her even weaker. On October the 28th, selections began to relocate women to Bergen-Belsen. Anne, Margot and also August van Pels were relocated. Edith Frank was too weak and she died of disease. Otto also stayed behind in Auschwitz, but he was still alive. But Bergen-Belsen was not better than Auschwitz. There was hardly any food and it was very cold, and there were also many contagious diseases. Anne was briefly reunited with two friends. One of them was Nanette Blitz. She was in the same section of the camp where she met Anne again. Nanette survived the war and she told that Anne was bald, emaciated and shivering. Anne also told her that she wanted to write a book about her diary when the war would end. The other girl was Anne's best friend Hannelie Goslar. She found out that Anne was on the other side of a barbed wire fence and she gave Anne some food by throwing it over the fence. And Anne told her that Margot was very ill and that August van Pelt took care of Margot. Anne also wanted to die because she believed that both of her parents already died, which was of course partly true. This was also the last time that Hannelie would talk with Anne, and this happened around January of 1945. Anne and Margot both contracted typhus. There was an epidemic that spread through the camp, killing 16,000 prisoners. And Anne and Margot became very ill. And some witnesses testified that Margot fell from her bunk while she was very weak and that she died by the shock. Anne died a day after her sister. And the sad part is that this happened just a few weeks before the British soldiers would liberate the camp on the 15th of April 1945. Although some research indicates that they died around February of the same year. The Van Pels family and Fritz Pfeffer also died in the concentration camp. Otto Frank survived his time in Auschwitz. He returned to Amsterdam in June 1945. Jan and Miep Gies, who were the helpers if you still remember it, sheltered him while he was trying to locate his family. First he heard that his wife had died, which of course broke his heart, but he remained hopeful that his daughters might still be alive. After several dreadful weeks, he finally discovered that both of his daughters also didn't make it. And Otto was devastated, as you can imagine. Miep Gies wanted to comfort Otto and she gave him Anne's diary and a bundle of loose notes. She kept the diary safe after the family was betrayed. She hoped to return it to Anne, but unfortunately she was never able to give it back to her. And Otto was very impressed by the diary. He had no idea that she kept such a detailed and well-written record of their time in hiding. He found out things about his daughter that he never knew, including the fact that she wanted to become a writer. Friends convinced Otto that he had to publish the diary, and in June 1947, 3,000 copies of the book named Het Achterhuis were printed. And it became a worldwide bestseller. It was translated into 70 languages and it was also adapted for stage and screen. The hiding place also became a museum in 1960 called the Anne Frank House. Otto died in 1980 when he was 91 years old. Now you know the whole story, which is very, very heartbreaking and sad. And the biggest question that comes into the minds of many people, including myself, is who betrayed the Anne Frank family and the other people in the Achterhuis? It is known that they were betrayed with a phone call to the headquarters in Amsterdam of the Sicherheidsdienst. Maybe it was one of the helpers, or did someone in the warehouse hear them? There are many theories and we might even know the truth, and I'll discuss them all with you. First, let's take a look at the helpers. One of them was Victor Kugler. It's unlikely that he had any part in it because he was also sent to a concentration camp. And this happened because the Nazis discovered that he helped the Frank family. Luckily, he managed to escape his transportation to Nazi Germany and he never regretted helping his friend Otto Frank. Johannes Kleiman also had been arrested, but luckily he was released due to interference of the Red Cross. If they were both helping the Nazis capturing Jews, it's unlikely that they were captured themselves and that they would be sent to concentration camps or a prison. So I think we can say that they had no part in it. The other helpers were not captured, so that leaves them to be suspected. Miep Gies has never really been seen as a suspect, and neither her husband. Some authors claim that Beb Voskau might betray the Franks. They stated that she secretly enjoyed protection because her sister was a collaborator. This is only speculation though, because it never has been confirmed. But there is a good explanation why the women who were among the helpers were not arrested. Most of the time the directors were held responsible and not the secretaries. So this would mean that they were free to go. Then there was also a factory worker named Willem van Maarten. They believe that he might have made the phone call to betray the families in hiding. But this is also very unlikely because private telephone communications were all but down due to large-scale disconnections. Regular citizens like Willem van Maarten would have limited opportunity to place a call like that. Also, the helpers and the people in hiding did not trust him. After the war, Otto Frank and the helpers filed a complaint against him on suspicion of betrayal. Van Maarten fought the accusations and eventually the sub-district court dismissed the complaint. No evidence has been found ever since. Another suspect was Tony Allers. He was a Dutch National Socialist. Otto Frank expressed a negative opinion about the German war chances and Tony heard it. He pressured Otto Frank and extracted money from him. He did not like Otto Frank, that we know for sure, but we don't know if he knew about the secret hiding place. Then there was Lena Hartog. Her husband did some work in the warehouse. He knew that people were hiding there and he told this to his wife. But nobody knows if he told her about the hiding place before they were captured or after they were captured. It would not be weird if he knew about it after the arrest because he was there when it happened and Lena told her friends about it, but this could easily have been after her husband had witnessed the arrest and told her about it. Some people claim that the caller was a woman who could have been Lena. Regardless, this story is very weak. Another woman was Ans van Dijk. She was a Jewish woman and she was arrested because of that. They gave her the choice to be deported or to help the authorities to track down other Jews. She decided to help the authorities and she made a large number of victims. One story tells that she knew the night guard who discovered the burglary in the building where the family was hiding in 1944. This could have been the connection to the warehouse, but the story is unverifiable. There is also another theory that suggests that they might not have been betrayed at all. The address could have been raided over ration fraud. Anne wrote many times about the arrest of two men who dealt in illegal ration cards. The men were called Martin Brouwer and Pieter Daetzelaar. They were both salesmen for a firm that was also based on the same address. When they were arrested, the family lost some of their coupons. Since they used the coupons for food, this was a very big problem for the people in hiding. The policemen who discovered the hiding place were also not generally employed to hunt down Jews in hiding. They worked on cases involving cash, securities and jewelry. So it could be that the police was searching the warehouse for illegal practices, but instead found the hiding Jews in the annex. This would of course mean that this was all an unfortunate coincidence. And I think that would be even worse. But in the beginning of last year, so in 2022, a new article was released that stated the identity of the betrayal suspect. And I remember when I saw it that I opened it right away because I was so excited. I really hoped that there would be an answer. It mentioned a name and the name was Arnold van den Berg. He was also Jewish and he probably gave up the francs to save his own family. As a member of the Jewish Council in Amsterdam, he had to implement Nazi policy in Jewish areas. Of course, this was something they did not like doing. Eventually, its members were dispatched to concentration camps, yet he was not sent to a camp as well as his family. They were living a pretty normal life in Amsterdam, as far as it could be normal for Jews during that time. There was also a rumor that a member of the Jewish Council in Amsterdam was helping the Nazis by giving them information. It's hard to believe that another Jewish person would betray someone from his own religion, but if he did it to protect his own family, it's not that hard to believe anymore, because I don't know if we can really say something about that. I don't know what I would do in that situation. I hope I would not betray other people, but if they would kill my family, and I'm not talking about myself, because if I get killed by saving other people, I would not mind. Of course, I would be sad about it, but my life is not more important than someone else's life. But I think if they would say I can save your family instead of people you don't know, maybe I would choose the same thing. We can't say it if we haven't experienced it, and hopefully we never have to experience it. Investigators are even convinced that Otto Frank knew that Arnold van den Berg did it, but that Otto kept it a secret. The investigators found a file with a copy of an anonymous note to Otto Frank, and that note suggested that Arnold van den Berg betrayed Otto and his family. Otto might fear that it would stoke fires even further and decided to leave it that way. Jews were put in very difficult situations many times where they would have to choose the safety of their family or someone else's that they did not know. But yet again, not everyone is convinced that he's the one who did it. So there are a lot of suspects, and even if the papers say we know the identity of the person who betrayed the Frank family, we don't know it for 100%. I think it's very difficult to say who betrayed them. Of course, it has been so many years ago. The war has been over 75 years ago, and many things were lost during the war, or they were burned to keep away the evidence. The people who might have known are all dead, because otherwise they would be 120 years old or maybe even older. And they probably didn't even write it down. It was not important who placed the call, but only who were hiding. It's a very sad story and it breaks my heart every single time. I find it very difficult to tell this story because I'm very scared that I won't give it justice, that I forget things, or people might think I'm disrespectful, which I really hope I'm not, and I really tried my best. But it's such a delicate subject that's very difficult to talk about, but it's very important to talk about it because this happened to people. This is very, very painful. A painful page in the history books, but also a page that we have turned, but we can look back to it to avoid making the same mistakes again. Anne was such a sweet and innocent girl, just like many other Jewish people who were also killed in the war. And even if she was not a sweet and innocent girl, nobody deserves to die that way. It's really sickening, and I really hope that history won't repeat itself. I just don't understand how you can hurt other people that way. I know we all fight sometimes, but you cannot do this to another human being or even an animal, to nobody. It's just sickening. So this video, I think it's a long video. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as you can enjoy a video like this, or at least that you learned something. I really hope you find it interesting. Once again, if you are in Amsterdam, go visit the Anne Frank house. It's really, really impressive. I'm gonna go again one day because yeah, I have seen it once when I was, I think 14, 15, maybe the same age as Anne, and I really want to see it once again now that I'm an adult. Go read her book. It's a very interesting book. I really don't know how to describe it, but you should really read her book. If you are still here, I really appreciate that you've watched the entire video. If you like it, please give a thumbs up. If you like it even more, you can also subscribe to my channel. And I really hope to see you in my next video. Bye!